Jerry Watterson, and this is Chef Dennis Chan, and we're the hosts of the Snack Stories podcast. Today, our guest is Luis Montiel. Luis is an attorney. He does, correct me if I'm wrong, but civil law, criminal law, and then probate. So, wills, estates, trusts, that kind of stuff too.
Correct.
All right.
He keeps us out of trouble.
That's it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. He can now. Right? Yeah. He definitely has kept me out of trouble for a long time. Good friend of mine. But as we dive in, let's dive into some snacks.
Yeah, let's start in with the
snack
stuff. So today I have for you geek clusters. Geek clusters. And they're like some kind of gummy with nerds on the outside.
It's like the chewy nerds. Have you had chewy nerds?
No.
That's what they look like.
Yeah, they look like the nerd rope.
It's gummy in the middle and then chewy on the outside.
So I definitely have to try a couple of pieces.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, can't just do one.
No,
Come on now. If we're eating sugar, let's eat it.
That's right.
So, the latest thing now, and you see it all over the place. You can order it online or you can go. There's a store dedicated to it. I went way out west to get these from a gas station.
West of Jacksonville or way
west of Jacksonville?
Okay. You said way out west of California, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's
very
interesting.
Chewy.
That's a lot chewier than I've experienced before. Mm-hmm. So I'm a bit of an expert in freeze-dried candy, at least in the sense that I've eaten every single one there possibly is, and especially freeze-dried ice cream. Usually with these, they're crunchier in the middle.
Oh.
This is
very airy.
If you've ever had a stale Whopper, this is the kind of the chewy texture on the inside of that. And I don't mean that in a bad way necessarily, but usually you bite this and you hear crunch. So that one's
still really
different.
Sour though for it having that much air in it, or what it's supposed to.
Does that that's very sour. When it it's not like tearjerker sour, but it's pretty sour for nerds. Does having a lot of air in something take away sourness?
No, it's just usually you get more mass and less. It's just less sour per area. Gotcha. So this gas station is pretty cool. They have a whole end cap that is just freeze-dried candy.
Just freeze-dried candy, yeah. Geek clusters. You guys go first because I'm biased.
What's our scale? 1 to 5?
1 to 10.
1 to 10.
Good rating.
I think for kids, it would be a higher rating than it is for me. So as a kid at heart, I would say probably a 7.
That's actually exactly the number I was thinking, a 7. But I'm also contrasting it to a nerd rope. And so...
nerd rope's better or worse?
I would say that the nerd rope is better.
For sure.
It's a little bit better, but this is with being freeze-dried. I think it's very airy, so that's a little different, and it's nice. 4. And the reason that's why I went last, because I felt like I would take your numbers, because I knew it was going to be lower than you guys. Yeah.
But I've tried every freeze-dried candy, and I think one of the joys of freeze-dried candy is the crunch. That you're taking this thing that's normally chewy and you're making it crunchy. This, to me, is too chewy. So it's too close to the original, and the original is better. So just my take on it. Skittles are a great choice when you're going to do a freeze-dried candy. Skittles have a beautiful crunch to it. You still get all the flavor. It is kind of airier. It almost has more mass in your mouth because it's freeze-dried. To me, though, it's weird to me that we have this freeze-dried candy craze, and they left out the ice cream because... freeze-dried ice cream is one of the great joys in life to me.
Oh, yeah.
And the freeze-dried ice cream that most people have had is the bad flavors. So you get a low-grade vanilla at the planetarium or at a space place. Have spaceman ice cream, right?
I've only had the Neapolitan.
Right. So, but you got low-grade ice cream stuffed in a low-grade cookie, and it was okay. Still really enjoyable, actually, to me. But... you can freeze dry any ice cream. So if you go on Etsy, and I have done this many, many times, and if you love ice cream, and especially if you love freeze dried ice cream, or you like the stuff you got at the planetarium or whatever space oriented place, the museum, You will adore the ice cream you can find on Etsy. They have every flavor. They have bluebell cherry vanilla, which is really good. Cookies and cream is somewhat nice. Chocolate chip cookie dough is nice because you get this contrasting texture and flavor between vanilla in the ice cream, but then also the cookie dough that has a very interesting sort of grainier texture and crunch. And, you get a chocolate flavor that pops out like real chocolate. It's...
I know what
It's
snacks
magic.
we have coming up soon for a tasting.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
now
I
I'm excited. No, that sounded like something I'm going to like. So anyway, that's my diatribe on freeze-dried stuff. If you like it, definitely Etsy is where to go. And I'm going to forget the name of my favorite
I get
store.
the excuse of having, I have 2 9-year-olds, so I have the excuse of saying it's for them.
That's amazing. There you go. There you go.
Great
My
excuse.
4-year-old loves them. So we'll put my favorite store in the. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. Oh, Susie's. I don't know. Susie is the person who makes my favorite freeze-dried ice cream, and we'll link to it in the comments. So if you want freeze-dried ice cream,
Shout
you can
out
find
to
the best.
Susie.
Susie got the stuff. Susie has the stuff on Etsy. So anyway, good stuff. Let's dive in. Luis, tell us a bit about you. I mean, background is immigrated from Venezuela when you were how old?
Well, originally 2.5. We tried to get paperwork, so I lived here till about 4.5. Then went back for a period of almost 5 years, and then I've been in the United States since I was 9 years old.
Okay.
So most of my life I've lived in Jacksonville, Florida, but I have kept a very strong tradition. And in my household, we only spoke Spanish, and we focused only on Spanish foods in the beginning when we first immigrated here. And even though there weren't a lot of Latino people in Jacksonville, we try to keep that part of our culture very strong. And so I love Jacksonville. I feel like I'm a Jacksonvillian, but I speak both languages in their native accent. So people tell me I sound like a Southern person. And then when I speak Hispanic or Latino language, I speak it like a Venezuelan.
So you don't get the Venezuelans don't tell you like, oh, you sound like a gringo now or anything like that?
No, quite the opposite. If anything, when I've traveled the world and I've been to 7 different Latino countries, people believe that I'm originally from Caracas, Venezuela, which is the capital of Venezuela.
Nice.
Yeah. But they picked me out as a gringo because of the way I dress and the way I carry myself, but not because of the way I sound.
Touche.
Yeah.
And people from other countries, they can tell just by, like, you walk up to someone and they can tell just by the way you stand that you're not from there.
Correct.
So, when I went to visit China, I tried to just walk up and not say anything because the last time that I went there, there were 2 prices. You paid one price if you were overseas Chinese and one price if you were a native. And you just walk up and give them the money and you would think, but they like start asking you questions and then they just know that you're not a native. So, yeah.
So you had to get your friend that's local to walk up and be like,
Yes.
hey.
That's right. Please negotiate on my behalf.
That's great. I'm in Guatemala. Luis went down to Guatemala with me previously too. You might have even been there on this trip, but I have a good friend who he literally sold everything he owned and moved down as a missionary to Guatemala and has done amazing things. But we were with him and he was helping somebody to get a new tire for their truck or their car that had a flat tire and whatnot, had to have a new tire. And so we drive up to the tire place and, it's not like the U.S. where you like walk in and we do some paperwork and all that. The guy walks out to the truck window that we're sitting in and they have a conversation about buying a tire. And then the guy quotes him a price and he looks at him and he tells him in Spanish, like, listen, I'm from here. Don't give me the gringo price. And then we got the real price. And the guy's like, oh, and gives him the real price. So, yeah, absolutely.
That happens in just about every culture in the world.
Almost everywhere but the U.S.
That's right.
You really I've never seen somebody get that price in the U.S. if you're not from here. But maybe that's just because we're the melting pot. You know what I mean? We're the place where, like, everybody is us. Everybody becomes us, It's to me, it's one of the most beautiful things about America is that we have this incredible immigrant culture. And it's something I hope we never lose because we always have these fantastic people come from all over the world and we get the best of everything. we get the best of every culture in the world, just blended together.
Yep.
In this American soup.
That's right. The American dream, right? And I think every culture has some value to add. And when you bring it in an environment that accepts it and sharpens it, it's always going to create a better situation, a better scenario, a better product, a better good, a better service. And so that's why I think America has been competitive for such a long time.
So let's talk food culture. We're talking culture. Let's talk food culture. What's the food culture like in Venezuela? What are the things that you missed when you came here? Like what that you couldn't have aside from mom and dad cooking those things, and you know, some of your favorite foods today.
Okay, so I think the biggest thing that I noticed was that every meal wasn't a big ordeal. So in the Venezuelan culture, when I was growing up, sharing time with family and having meals with other people and with your family was basically a center point of the day. And I'll never forget my grandma on my dad's side. She was very intentional. If you walked into her house, she would always ask you if you were hungry, if she could feed you. She would ask you to sit down at the table. She would try to feed you, make you something, whatever she could do. And so you only get that on like the 4th of July or Thanksgiving or a Christmas meal, sometimes on Easter. It just depends on your culture. And so that was the biggest shock to me, is how the family wasn't centered around food. You know, I think of other culture that is very well known for that, is the Italian culture, and I compare it to that. It's just, there were many a times where people weren't really interested in sharing food. It wasn't a centerpiece of your day, and so that was the biggest shock. That was the biggest thing. Now,
that food was always like rushed, right?
That's right. Rushed. Time is the most valuable thing, and our culture in America is very much go, go, go. Time is worth money, and unfortunately, it takes away from just enjoying each other's company, sharing in food, and really connecting. That was one of the biggest things that I definitely missed. The thing that I liked a lot was what you just mentioned, was that there was a melting pot of food here, and that you could taste all kinds of cultures of food. And I didn't have that growing up. You know, it was very traditional. Actually, I was extremely limited. My dad grew up in a wealthy family, but didn't like seafood. And so the only times I ever tasted seafood was when my mom would order something every once in a while at like a restaurant, and she would have me have a piece of it. And so I grew up very much on steak, chicken, and pork. And very little seafood, and so from that environment, I was a little bit limited.
Awesome. So what's the Venezuelan food you miss the most in the U.S.?
So there's two. One of them I have as frequently as possible, which is the breakfast, and it's called arepa con perico and white cheese, and that's my favorite. And I eat it probably 3 to 4 times a week, if they let me. And it's you grab a tomato and you saute the tomato at low temperature until it creates a juice. Then you put in the onion, and you allow the onion to glisten, to caramelize a little bit, and then you put in the egg last, and you mix it almost like an omelet, but it's scrambled. And so that's considered the perico. And then the arepa is, they sell it in stores. It's a cornstarch meal that you can make into a sandwich type, almost like a biscuit. In the south it'd be comparable to a biscuit. And then the white cheese is very particular because it's a little bit salty, and the texture is almost like tofu. And so that's my favorite. The second favorite would be what we'd consider a traditional meal, which is the Puerto Ricans call it ropa vieja. We call it carne mechada, and carne mechada with white rice, plantains that are put in this sweet caramelized sauce, and then black beans. That's like the staple of what everybody eats. And so for dinner, that's something that I miss a lot. And I've changed my diet in the last few years, and I don't eat as much red meat as I used to. Actually, almost none nowadays. And so that's a plate that I miss like crazy. I miss it a lot.
Getting old and having to get healthy is one of those brutal things
Yes,
in life.
that's right. It definitely changes the taste buds.
Trying to eat more salads and some vegetables and all that, and you know.
Not the cool candy like here.
You just painted two beautiful pictures of these dishes with the description that you gave of it, and like my mouth is watering for these two dishes now, just as you mentioned.
You know, I heard Luis talking about the first dish, and like, Dennis, we're gonna have to shoot a video of that. And you're gonna have to make that dish. We're gonna have, to, or we'll have, you know, we either have a Venezuelan chef come in and make it with us, but I think it would be really fun to make that, because that's something I don't know that I've ever seen before. The breakfast dish. You know, I mean, I think most people who are into food have had ropa vieja or an equivalent, but not the breakfast dish. The breakfast dish sounds pretty magical.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's fairly healthy for you. So I eat it all the time.
You do so?
And and arepa is actually better than bread. At least most breads that are sold in stores, and so being able to make that at home is actually good.
Corn based, yeah.
Correct.
Absolutely.
I've only been to one place that makes something close to that. And it's a Colombian place.
Okay.
So, but that's why you painted such a beautiful picture. We do need to make.
It was like just passion, easy,
Yes.
right? That was so.
Yes.
That's what I love about food, right? Is it like takes you to a moment. Mm-hmm. There's so many foods that for me take me to a moment. Like my grandmother used to love to bake. She'd bake every Christmas. And she lived in Minnesota, so her porch became the freezer at Christmas because it's cold as sin up there. And forgive me, Minnesotans, you guys are amazing at that. I'm not. I freeze. But anyway, so whole front porch, and it was like literally wall to wall food.
Yeah.
And she had these cinnamon buns that would just, I can still remember standing there. And then she always baked these cookies who no one can replicate perfectly anymore. They're called Aunt Sally's, and they had like this great white hard icing over the top. Like completely hard, so you couldn't like push it and move it or anything. Just completely hard over a cookie that, about like that. And I think most people's grandmothers have this like one thing they made perfect. Like my wife's tried to replicate it, my mother's tried to replicate it. No one can replicate this thing. It's just perfection. I can still remember standing there on the porch with a frozen one, just eating that bad boy, and it's just a moment, you know. At Christmas in Minnesota, seeing the snow was just that was that moment for you, I think.
Yep.
It's like.
Yeah, it's a perfect memory, you know, engraved in there.
This joy, this true joy that comes from it. That's cool. So, I want to share a personal story real quick, and then you can kind of share your thoughts that maybe can help people listening. So Luis and I actually in college, went to college together, and we ran for student body president and vice president together. And every day we went to like different club meetings or gave different speeches, and honestly I didn't have the greatest interpersonal skills at the time, right? Like there's a million goofy funny stories from that time, and my odd interpersonal skills, but I had a passion for people and I wanted to make things better at the university we were at, so off we went to run together. And every day at the end of the day, Luis would break down every interpersonal interaction I had and teach me how to do it better, how what I said made someone uncomfortable, how what I said made someone not like me, how, you know, what I said endeared someone to me. All of those things, kind of broke down each one of those things, and then like, okay, if you said it this way, they would have understood it. If you did this way, or chose not to say this person would have really liked you. Those kinds of things. Like you always have this unbelievable natural charisma and like ability to connect with people. Just this innate something special when it comes to that. So if you had a couple tips, give us like 3 tips people can use to be better at connecting with other people.
I think the most important thing is that you have to listen. And most of us are not very good at that. And you have to have an open heart, open mind, and have good eye contact to pay attention and listen and really begin to ask yourself, what is it that this person is trying to communicate to me? Because you can communicate things with words, but so much of what we communicate is subconscious and also with our body language. And so when you're really listening, you're paying attention to all of that. You're watching the person, you're making eye contact, you're ensuring that they know that they're being heard. And so that is the first and most important thing. The second thing is when you begin to identify or bond with somebody on an issue, express that. A lot of us are so nervous and so careful about what people think of us, and it's fine. It's human nature. We all care about what somebody thinks. We all want to be liked. We all want to be remembered in a positive light. But when you're first communicating and when you're first speaking to somebody, it's so important that you let them know that it matters, that what you're saying you're identifying with. Either it's a head nod or, oh yeah, I have the same story, I have the same experience. Something like that is very important. And the last thing I would say is make sure that you ask if you can reword something or if you're being understood. And you have to be careful in that last one, because you don't always want to say, do you understand? Hey, am I making myself clear? Because at some point it can come across insulting, it can come across demeaning, and so you have to communicate it and be intentional and say it in different forms. But the important message is, did I say that in a way that you understood it? And if not, then what can I do differently? What should I say differently? How can I say it in a different form so that we can communicate effectively? And those three things, if you do that, you'll become a great communicator. There's actually also books that I would recommend in regards to body language and negotiation, but we can talk about that at a later time.
So I'm sure top of the list for succeeding with a jury is an ability to connect with people. So dive in for us and tell us, like, what led you to dive into law school, become an attorney? Why'd you want to be one? And then kind of tell us, where that's taking you today.
Okay. I had a negative experience with law enforcement when I was 16 years old. And the police officer failed to list the other two people that were in the vehicle. And I felt really jaded by that. I felt like he had misled the police report, and so I wanted to do something about that. I wanted to represent people like myself who didn't have a voice, or maybe the whole truth hadn't been exposed, and so it impassioned me to start practicing law. And so at the age of 16, I knew I was going to be an attorney. And so what did I do next? I was very involved in athletics when I was young. I went to Fletcher High School. And so I got involved in a mock trial program. It was one, I think, of the two schools at that time, us and Wolfson, who was in the mock trial program, who had a strong mock trial program. And I'll never forget, he's passed away now, Ed Lang, as a mentor and really one of the pinnacles in my life, a pillar, better said. Is he focused on teaching me how to do mock trial. And there was an attorney that we had at the time who was very successful. Actually, he was the attorney behind America's Most Wanted. His name was Jay Howell. And Jay Howell was our coach. So between Ed Lang and Jay Howell, they taught us and tried to mimic exactly what a jury trial would be like. And the way that the mock trial program worked is they would alternate. One year you would have a criminal case, and then the other year you would have a civil case. And so each and every year you got to practice, and they would coach you in the process. And so you got experience with an opening statement, you had experience with a closing statement, you learned how to direct, you learned how to cross-examine, and you also learned how to object. And so I had that experience, which then I carried over to UNF. UNF also had a mock trial program at that time with Marty Edwards. And that first and second year that I was involved in the mock trial program at UNF, we went to nationals.
And just to clarify, UNF is the University of North Florida, if you're not from this area.
Oh yeah, I apologize.
You're good.
So at the University of North Florida, that mock trial program was very strong. They had a pre-law program that was very strong, and we went to nationals. So we competed against the entire nation, and we placed, I believe, second and fourth in our best year. And so
passion leads you to dive into law. you have all these amazing mentors who come around you and help you give you the skills. So then how does that take you to where you're at today? So we're diving in today. How did that lead you towards, or how did you decide on what part of law you were going to focus on?
So mentors, I think, are a big part in life, and the people that help shape you. It's very important to have people that you look up to. I've always believed that you need to have somebody that does something great that you view as an example, and ask yourself, what are they doing? How can I do it like them? Or maybe one day, how can I do it better than them?
I know that's a lesson Dennis and I would both preach. Dennis has had some unbelievable chef mentors who've really shaped who he's become as a chef. And then I've had many along the way in business who, given me the tools that I need to get there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think to throw you a bone, you've helped me become a better business person because of some of the business exposure that you've had through your family business and watching the greats do it, right? If you are going to be excellent at anything, you have to mimic greatness. You have to focus on it. You have to study it. And so these people helped shape my life. And so there was another person that I consider, I call him my American dad. His name is John Khalil, and he practiced personal injury law. And so that's what I was exposed to in college after 2002, and something that I knew that eventually that I would want to practice. The problem with it is that you see these big firms that have a lot of money in advertising, and so it's very difficult to compete right out from the get-go in that market. And so it's something that I knew I would want to do, and that I would want to focus on jury trials, but it takes a long time to develop. So with that, I said, I'm going to take it very slow. I'm going to use my mentors. I had a business at the time that was called Bounce Around Jacks. We focused on inflatables and private parties. And we had 3 crews running at one time that would deliver to people's homes, essentially a party, everything that you needed. And so I had income, and I took it very slow. I said, I'm going to try the different parts of law that I think I want to do, and by a process of elimination, I started to kind of fine-tune the 3 areas where I really wanted to focus on. I did some other parts of law, and I'm not going to speak negatively on the air about it, but I've done some other types of law that I don't ever want to practice. And God bless the people that practice.
Come on now, you got to give us what? Give us one you just absolutely can't do.
Family law, it is awful. You can't ever make anybody happy. You can't ever really win. Most of the time, the people that are going through divorce are putting the kids in the middle, and the ones that are suffering are the little ones. And it over and over again, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to see kids being used as tools to punish either parent, and it's fundamentally shouldn't work like that. And unfortunately, because of the process, because of the emotions, it's naturally what people do to hurt one another because they know that they can use their child and that it's going to bother the other person. And so that's the one area that I'm trying not to practice whatsoever. It's really hard when somebody from my church group or somebody that I've grown up with asks me to help, and I know that I'm good at it, but at the same time, it's very, very difficult.
Soul sucking, yeah?
That's right. That's exactly the word I would use. It drained me. And I wasn't happy. And the money didn't matter. It didn't matter if they wanted to pay me $450, $500 an hour. I wouldn't do it. It doesn't matter.
I think that's one of the lessons in life that we've shared with each other is that, like, if you're not doing something you like doing, you enjoy doing for work, there's just no reason to be there. Even if it's worth a lot of money. I mean, I'm sure there's a number where we'll suffer for money, but even if it's worth a lot of money, if it makes you miserable, it's not worth it.
That's right.
So tell us about the good stuff. Tell us about you were saying there's 3 areas of law that you're practicing today. Tell us about those. So
I'm also doing personal injury now. I've just hit a little bit over my 8th year, so I'm in a place where a lot of people I'm still word of mouth. I have not advertised whatsoever. I don't even have a website to this day. And I'm busier than I've ever been, and I thank God for that. And I thank my friends and my references and all the clients that I've ever had for that. I'm very grateful. But personal injury, because you help put someone's life back together after they've been seriously injured. That is so much fun to me. It's also fun to take on the biggest bully in the world, which is the insurance companies. I despise the insurance companies. I hate them with a passion. They take your dollars each and every day, and then when you go to make a claim and you have a legitimate claim and you need help, they try to figure out every legal way that they can deny you, and they try to nickel and dime you, and fundamentally that's wrong. They have trillions of dollars in earnings every year, and they're trying to nickel and dime and step on the little folk, and that's just not right. Fundamentally not right. There's also probate law, so it focuses on trust, wills, and estates. That's so important. Right now, we are going through the baby boomer generation, right? The baby boomer generation is passing away. And so the biggest transfer of wealth that the United States has ever seen is occurring right now. And I'm helping in that process. I want to be part of that process. I want to make sure that people are protected, that their assets are placed in a good spot, that if they don't want to go to probate court, that they understand that they should have a good will in place and more than likely a trust in place. And that's going to ensure that you don't have to go and litigate and fight over everything, and that you don't leave yourself open either to liability or to fights after you pass away. And then the third area, which I like to do, is of course what got me impassioned in it, is criminal law. Now I don't focus on, I'd say the harder crimes I'd usually leave alone, but the things that I believe that the average person could make a mistake on, I love to defend. Or something that where I fundamentally believe that the person that got in trouble genuinely just was not in the right mind frame, maybe had an addiction problem, but wasn't a hardcore criminal. When it comes to hardcore criminals, I usually will refer it to attorneys who are more focused in that area. But those are the three areas that really I get excited about. I wake up every day ready to go. I wake up every day ready to meet a new client or to take on these quote unquote bullies, right? And it just makes it fun. It makes it worth living. There's a saying here in the South that says if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And those three practice areas are truly the practice areas that make me passionate, that make me not feel like I'm working, and I could literally put 12, 14, even sometimes 16-hour days and it feel like a blink of an eye.
So a lot of our viewers are restaurateurs. What are some of the things in your three areas of law that restaurateurs need to watch out for?
Okay.
To protect themselves.
The first and most important is understanding your insurance plan. Most of us are going to be required when we own a business to have some type of insurance. So make sure that you understand what your limits are, what your liability is, if there's any exceptions, basically the loopholes that the insurance company has that they can deny you on. That's the very first and most important thing, because most of us operate with insurance, right? It's kind of a necessary evil, right? The second thing I believe as a restaurant owner or as a restaurateur, you need to be aware. A lot of us of our culture, we're aware of the criminal liability of things, but we're not aware of the civil liability. And so you have to begin to condition your brain as to the civil liability of things. Okay, if that door is jammed right there, there's an exit to my left. If that door is jammed and somebody can't get out in a fire, how does that expose you to liability? If you leave a wet area after a cup spills, how does that expose you to liability? We understand, most of us have been to a place where a spill area happens, and then you see a yellow sign that says, caution, walk, do not walk here, it's wet. That's the type of conditioning that must happen in order to be successful as a restaurant owner. Also, who your food sources are, right? If you're getting junk food and there's, shrapnel or a tooth of a cow or something that exposes you to liability, that's also going to be important. So being aware and mostly trying to put people what we call in the law on notice. So if you have a problem, let's say your toilet doesn't flush, right, and it could cause leaking, and then that cause somebody to slip. Okay, we'll put somebody on notice. Oh, hey, fortunately right now our toilet's having problems. There could be a leak. Please be careful when you step around here. We're trying to get it fixed as soon as possible, but just be aware of that. Put the yellow sign out. And then that way it begins to mitigate things. It's very important. The law changed in 2023. The legislature changed. And so...
This is in Florida or nationally?
In Florida. Okay. I'm speaking about Florida. So the legislature changed the law. We used to be what was called a pure comparative. What does that mean? So let's say I'm here at the restaurant. You didn't put a sign out, and I slip and fall. Okay, it would go to the trier of fact. So that could be a judge or a jury. And they would decide. They would say, okay, look, the restaurant owner was 80% at fault because he didn't put a sign out, but they should have noticed. They shouldn't have walked on that, so we're going to give them 20% liability. All right, so at that point, what would happen? If the verdict was $1 million, let's just use a round figure, $1 million, and you were 80% at fault, you would be $800,000. That would be the verdict, right? Well, if now the way it works is we are essentially still calling ourselves a comparative state, but really we become kind of what we learn as a contributory state. And what does that mean? That means that if you contribute to your own negligence, or they argue that you're negligent 51%, then it bars the claim. And so, as a restaurant owner in the state of Florida or in any other state, it's very important that you figure out what the negligence law is, whether you're in a comparative state or you're in a contributory state, because it's going to matter how much notice you put people on and how much work you do to prevent any kind of issues in your restaurant that may be able to protect you from a lawsuit. The second biggest thing is once you start to own things, once you're past that third year, we know the rule that in the first 3 years of business, it's when they fail. And once you're past those 3 years, most businesses are going to stay in business. And so once you're past those first 3 years, you're going to want to begin to protect your assets, right? In the state of Florida, we have a homestead, so they can't take your home. A lot of doctors here buy bigger and bigger houses the richer they get, or the more wealthier they become. Why? Because they can't take that away. And so even if they get in this massive lawsuit and they take their practice and they take everything, well, they have a nest egg with the home that they can then go and sell later, or they can pass on to their children. The second thing is
that's protected in bankruptcy too, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. It's at least in the state of Florida.
In the state of Florida.
Right. The other big thing is that you need to then begin to consider how you're gonna protect it. And in the state of Florida, I highly recommend trusts. And trusts essentially insulate your restaurant. Once you put it in a trust, it insulates it because essentially they can only go after those particular assets. Another big thing that we've heard of is the limited liability company. In the state of Florida, there's nothing better than an LLC. In an LLC, you are protected in the sense that as long as the LLC doesn't commingle funds, what does that mean? That you're not using the LLC like it's your pocketbook. You're not buying your girlfriend nice diamonds, that you're treating it completely like a separate account, that you're not taking loans and in and out. If you're using everything, that it's perfectly accounted and that it's kept separate as much as possible from your personal. And so if as long as you're doing that and you're not commingling assets, then the corporate veil can't be pierced. And as long as it can't be pierced, then an LLC is only liable for what it owns. And so let's say this was under an LLC and something happened, God forbid. Well, in that case, only the restaurant goes under, and then you as a person aren't liable. And so once again, understanding your state's liability laws, what negligence means, how you contribute, and then using every single vehicle possible to protect your assets is very important.
Amazing. Well, Luis, we really appreciate you you coming out to be a part of the podcast today and sharing so much of your knowledge with us. It was a lot of fun, and I think the thing we both both Dennis, I looked at Dennis's face when you were telling the story. Both Dennis and I think really connected with your food passion, with your passion for the food from the culture you came from. There's a magic to that. So.
And I want to thank you guys for having me on, for letting me be a part of what you're doing. I think it's awesome, and sharing your passion, because ultimately this is about food and it's about sharing our cultures, and thank you for letting me be here. I'm truly grateful.
And about people.
Yep, that's right. And that's what makes the world go around.
Awesome. So I hope you enjoyed it today with us again on another episode of Snack Stories. We'll have more snacks and we'll have more interesting people next week.